Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, welcome to yet another Viking.TV episode from Crete. I am Vangelis. I am born and bred here on Crete, and I've been working as a licensed tour guide for some 20 years now. Together, in previous Viking.TV episodes, we explore traditional music and dances of our beautiful island, plus highlights of Hania and Heraklion, the two major Mediterranean harbors that Viking cruise calls. In this new episode, we'll be discussing various aspects of Europe's early civilization that flourished right here on Crete, Greece's mythical island. My co-host in this effort is my dear friend Michael, Professor of Classics at the University of Houston.
Well, we thought it was only proper to begin here at an elevation of 2,400 feet atop Mount Iuctas, a mountain that we know was sacred to the Minoans. We are surrounded on all sides by an endless expanse of olive trees and vineyards, a landscape that looks much the same today as it did to the Minoans some 4,000 years ago.
Well, Michael, most of our guests know that Zeus actually ruled from Mount Olympus, but only a handful actually knows that he was born right here, in the mountain that you see at a distance, Mount Dicte. According to an ancient myth, Zeus's father, Cronos, was warned by an ancient oracle that one of his offsprings would take his throne. So he came up with a pretty smart solution to deal with this problem. Every time his wife, Rhea, the Titan, would deliver a baby, well, he would swallow it.
And that worked for a while, until Rhea became pregnant with her third son, Zeus. And this child Rhea is determined to keep. And that brings her here to Crete, to a cave just behind us on Mount Dicte, a cave bristling with stalactites and stalagmites. And there, deep in that cave, Rhea gives birth to Zeus in secret.
To protect infant Zeus, a group of young Cretan warriors drown out the loud baby's cries by performing martial dances outside the cave, singing at the top of their lungs. If you watch our previous episode, you'll see how this dance still survives in our contemporary musical traditions. Coming down from the peak of Mount Iuctas, we're including a stop at the beautiful village of Archanes to grab a quick coffee to go, in the hope that in our change we'll find a coin that will help us share with you the rest of the story. And here it is. There you see it. This is one of the most popular Greek myths depicted on the €2 coin.
This bull, in fact, is Zeus. He assumed the form of a bull to escape detection by his wife Hera, who was always jealous of his roving eye and his many encounters with goddesses and mortal women. In this instance, Zeus, up there on Mount Olympus, well, his roving eye spots Europa there in the east, a beautiful woman. And so he assumes the form of a bull, goes down to the seashore where Europa and many of her maidens are playing, and all these other women flee. They run at the sight of this impressive bull, but not the brave Europa. She gets right on his back, and they begin to take a ride up and down the seashore. And when Zeus realizes how comfortable Europa is, he decides that this is his opportunity. This is his moment. And so he makes his way slowly into the sea, and then before we know it, they are swimming all the way from Phoenicia here to Crete.
Well, that's a fascinating story, right?
Right.
Zeus's last destination here on Crete was a lush area in central Crete called Broaden. And according to the myth, in the shade of an evergreen plane tree, Europa and Zeus spend an unbelievable long time of passion, 9 days and 9 nights, the myth tells us. The result of that union was triplets, Michael.
I know.
Well, the firstborn was Minos, who became rightfully the heir to the throne of the island, obviously. So now I think that it simply makes perfect sense for us to move on into the lush valley of Knossos, where the famous palace is.
Absolutely.
Let's go. So here we are, Michael, ladies and gentlemen, in the lush valley of Knossos. The distance is the famous palace, the residence of the mythical king Minos. To the south, you can see the mountain of Iouchtas, where we began. And to the north, we have great views of the deep blue of the gorgeous Sea of Crete, the southern part of the Aegean Sea. Michael, would you like to add something here?
Well, sure. Since the site of Knossos is behind us, we should not fail to mention the name of Arthur Evans, the British scholar and archaeologist who unearthed a new civilization when he began excavating at Knossos at the turn of the 20th century, 1900 and in the years after that. But Evans and other scholars showed us that well before those grand palaces were built, human beings were living and flourishing in valleys like this one as far back as 10,000 years ago, what we call the Neolithic period, from the Greek words for new stone, the new Stone Age.
And Michael, since you mentioned Arthur Evans, we should inform our guests that, well, we don't really know what the people of Crete used to call themselves.
No.
And it was Arthur Evans himself who borrowed the name of King Minos and created the name of this entire civilization. We know from Egyptian hieroglyphics that the island of Crete was called by Egyptians Kaftor, and the people of the island were the famous Keftiu, that Egyptians were, well, having serious business with, exchanging different commodities. But everything else, well, all this was, I have to say, Evans's creation, huh?
Yes. It's good that you mentioned the Egyptians, because Crete is at the crossroads of the Mediterranean. From the south, from Egypt, comes gold. From elsewhere in the Aegean Sea, from the Cycladic Islands, come various other minerals. And from the north, from mainland Greece, comes tin. And then from the east, and especially from Cyprus, comes copper. You put tin and copper together, and you get bronze. And the arrival of bronze around 3000 BC transforms the island of Crete, as it does much of the rest of the Greek world. Bronze is a harder, more durable metal than the island had seen before, and it affects a great deal of social and economic change that eventually results in palaces like Knossos and the others that we find around the island. Knossos is actually the largest of the Minoan compounds on Crete, covering over 3 acres of land and consisting of hundreds of interconnected rooms, all organized around a massive open-air central courtyard. Several of these rooms are decorated with exquisite frescoes of the highest qualities. The one you see here, which Arthur Evans called the Throne Room of Minos, is distinguished by griffin frescoes and an alabaster throne built right into the wall. Browsing the palatial compound, you'll see many examples of Minoan architectural ingenuity and innovation, including grand staircases, balconies, and columns throughout the palace of local cypress trees, painted in vivid reds and blacks. But the power and authority of the ruling elite at Knossos is perhaps best shown in the many large storage areas called magazines, filled with enormous clay vessels that we call pithoi, each of them filled with various precious goods, olive oil, wine, grain from the surrounding area.
From the Valley of Knossos, it's just a short drive to the largest collection of Minoan artifacts now housed in the impressive archaeological museum. Next time Viking cruise calls the bustling Mediterranean harbor of Heraklion, excellent guides will show you around this beautiful collection. But today we'll be trying something different. Directly across from the museum, you'll find one of the best informed shops in the city selling Minoan replicas. The owner and our host is our good friend Calliope.
Well, this is remarkable. I mean, I feel like a kid in a Minoan candy store. The replicas of the masterpieces in the museum next door, here in this shop, are world class. And being here gives us a chance to do what we can't do in the museum, which is pick the objects up with our own hands and talk about them a little more intimately, a little more directly. Okay, so the real question here is, amid all these treasures, where do we start? Okay, we're going to start with one of my personal favorites in the museum. This is the famous bee pendant. I have seen so many times in a museum full of masterpieces, because this pendant is so small, it's no more than 2 inches across, I've seen so many people in the museum walk straight past it. When to me, amid all the marvels of the museum, this is in many ways the most impressive in terms of its craftsmanship and its history. So, for starters, what we have here are a pair of bees in an almost heraldic fashion facing one another. Together they are adding a little globule of honey to a honeycomb that they're sharing between them. Several discs hang from the two edges and the center of the pendant, and above them is a little cage with a golden bead. The workmanship is exquisite. It is made of gold. Now, it was found in Malia, one of the Minoan palace complexes in the east of Crete. Not in the palace complex itself, but in the burial grounds adjacent to the palace. Beautiful jewelry such as this would have adorned the bodies of elite Minoan women. We have vivid depictions of these women in frescoes found in a number of Minoan sanctuaries. My personal favorite is the one that Arthur Evans labeled La Parisienne, the Parisian woman. It's clear from these frescoes and other artifacts that women played major roles in Minoan society. But women played important roles not just in everyday Minoan society, but also in the religious life of the Minoans. As opposed to the Greeks, who would come along many centuries later, Minoan religion seems to have been dominated by women. And nowhere is this more in evidence than in the famous, enigmatic representation of this figure found by Arthur Evans in the treasury of the sanctuary next to the throne room at Knossos, that he called the snake goddess. Whether she was a priestess or a goddess, she holds in each of her hands a snake. Her top is open, emphasizing her fertility, her connection to Mother Earth, and she wears a characteristic flounced dress that we see adorning many other Minoan women. Other significant component of Minoan religion is masculine, and it is best epitomized by the most vigorous and powerful animal in the Mediterranean, the bull.
Hey, wait, you just said the bull. Are you perhaps talking about the Minotaur, the notorious half-man, half-bull creature that lived in the labyrinth?
Well, yes and no. According to one of the more famous Greek myths, Pasiphae, Minos' wife, slept with a bull, and from that union was born the Minotaur, half human, half bull. So after the birth of the Minotaur, Minos decides to confine him in a great maze, a labyrinth, there at Knossos. That labyrinth was built by Daedalus, an Athenian architect.
So what are you saying? Are you saying to our guests that the labyrinth never existed?
Well, the answer again is yes and no. There is something of a maze in the very palace of Knossos itself, with its extraordinarily intricate ground plan, hundreds and hundreds of rooms, all interconnected, looking very much like a maze, a labyrinth. This is a double-headed axe. Arthur Evans found many examples of them at Knossos, decorating the palace. In an ancient Greek dialect, the word for such an axe is labyris. And from that word labyris comes our word labyrinthos, or labyrinth. Now, we believe that a weapon like this would have been used to ceremonially dispatch bulls in religious rituals at the palace.
Well, Michael, with these beautiful artifacts, we could, simply go on for hours. The real question, though, is how do we get information on all these stories? Was there any actual writing, any script that Minoans were using in the 2nd millennium BC that conveys all these interesting stories?
Well, I know I sound like a broken record, but for the third time, yes and a little no. Yes, there is Minoan writing. We have Minoan writing in a couple of different scripts, glyphs, and then a series of linear symbols. The real problem with Minoan civilization is that we have to assume so much from their architecture and their artifacts, because their writing we have not yet deciphered. The most famous and famously enigmatic example of one of these scripts, one of the earliest Cretan scripts, is the so-called Festos disc. It was found not at Knossos, but at the second largest Minoan palace at Festos. It is a circular series of pictograms and ideograms running on both sides of the disc. There have been a number of ingenious and creative attempts to translate this disc, but ultimately, this is the only example we have on this scale of this kind of writing. We have a few of the symbols on other objects that we found, but in the most important ways, this is one of a kind, and we are still waiting on a translation.
Well, Michael, the disc is truly a fascinating object. Tell you the truth, though, I've been looking around and I've been trying to find, the famous linear A and linear B tablets from the 2nd millennium. I don't see any. So let me quickly check with Kalliopi. Καλλιοπή, έχεις καθόλου πινακίδες γραμμικής?
Δυστυχώς τελείωσαν. Τις έχω πουλήσει όλες, αλλά υπάρχει λύση. Αν θέλετε να βρείτε, θα πάτε στο εργαστήριο του Βασίλη να δείτε και την τεχνική και να βρείτε και ό,τι θέλετε.
Τέλεια. Αυτό θα κάνουμε. Ναι. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Παρακαλώ, να είστε καλά.
Okay, guys, let's go. Vangelis is Kalliopi's husband, an accomplished ceramicist who has spent years experimenting with Bronze Age pottery techniques. With Vangelis, we have built and installed a Minoan kiln at my family's farmhouse. There, we host our exclusive Bronze Age pottery seminars, offering our guests the opportunity to design and fire their very own creations using ancient Minoan techniques. Well, folks, Kalliopi was right, and this is actually pretty exciting. Here we are with our friend Vangelis. His workshop is just amazing. I'm really happy because we found him working with materials that potentially would have been used to make stamps for the symbols that we see on the disc of Festus. Let's go and have a look at what he's doing.
So I see that those stamps haven't been fired. They won't be damaged if you use them.
They are hard enough, but do you want to try yourself?
Actually, yeah, I'd love to. I'd like to show our viewers what linear A looks like. I understand you have some tablets that we can work with. Of course you do.
You're in the right place. Here is one, but to use it, I should paint it first, so that when you curve it, the letters will be more clear, more obvious.
Okay.
Okay, this is red ground. Just paint it. And now you can curve whatever you wish.
Okay.
It dries up very quickly.
It does?
Yes, yes.
All right, so I can carve directly on this now?
Yes, yes.
All right. The symbol that comes to mind right away is one of my favorites, and that is the linear A symbol for wine. So I'll just try carving this in here now. Now, although we know the meanings of a few symbols in linear A, the majority of linear A has not been translated. To put it another way, we do not know the language that the Minoans themselves spoke. Linear A seems to be a series of administrative records, records of imports and exports in the palaces. Arthur Evans found in Knossos not only large chunks and groups of linear A, but he also found another writing system using most of the same symbols but written a little differently. He called that linear B. Linear A, linear B. Linear B in the 1950s was proven to be an early form of Greek. And while I'm carving the linear B syllables for Knossos, the point we want to make here is that the use of a new language for the palace bureaucracy shows us that the Minoan elite have been replaced by Greek speakers from the mainland.
Just 10 minutes away from where your Viking ship is docked, we were looking for clues that might tell us how Minoans lost their grip on power. So here we are, Michael. In just a couple of minutes, we were able to collect
All this.
all of this. So many chunks of pumice. Pumice is a volcanic rock, obviously, and the nearest volcano to where we are is the famous volcano of Santorini, 60 miles north of Crete. Growing up as a young student, and even till a few years ago, the most common theory that would explain the decline of the Minoans was that the mega colossal eruption of Santorini that created the beautiful caldera of that island was the one that basically unleashed a massive wall of water, a massive tsunami that traveled 60 miles and blasted the northern coastline of the island, completely wiping out the Minoans. Well, recently we have found new evidence that basically tells a different story, and now we know for sure that the two events, the volcano and the decline of the Minoans, are not to be directly associated.
Yeah, you're right. It couldn't have been a volcanic eruption. It could not have been the famous volcanic eruption of Santorini, though that eruption was a couple of hundred years before the collapse of the Minoans. So, if we're going to keep looking for a reason why this prosperous, sophisticated, economically well-developed civilization collapsed, well, if you want my opinion, it was something much more likely to have been a widespread systems collapse, brought on possibly by something that this area is prone to, and that would be an earthquake. Many of the buildings in this village were constructed along the same lines and using many of the same materials, stone, mortar, as the Minoan Bronze Age palaces. And as you can see from the building behind me, if that is the extent of the damage from an earthquake that registered a 6.1, one can only imagine the damage wrought by a 7.0 or a 7.5. it may well have been destruction on that level, on that kind of scale, that contributed to the common people's distrust of the Minoan elite and perhaps contributed to widespread social unrest that triggered the end of the Minoans.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank Michael for his valuable contribution to this episode on Minoan Crete. More importantly, I would like to thank you for watching us today. And we really hope that this episode will function as an incentive for you to visit the Palace of Knossos and the marvelous archaeological museum in Heraklion next time you visit Crete on the next Viking cruise. Cheers. Cheers, Michael.
Cheers.